welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in the city of Portland that has a reputation for being sustainable when a lot of cities are still asleep. I'm here with my guests, Brendan Finn, who's the Chief of Staff with the Commissioner in charge of Sustainability, Sustainable Development.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And Randy White, who's been involved with the Peak Oil movement and the Peak Oil Task Force right now. Thanks for joining me, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, Portland put itself on the map in the world of peak oil last May when it passed a resolution about peak oil itself.
Right.
So, will you tell me, how did that come to be and what does that resolution say? I'll start with you, Randy.
It came to be because we live in a progressive city with citizens that care about not only themselves, but the community, the rest of the world, and in fact, and we realized that there's something wrong with the situation right now, and the energy part of the world. We're at war over energy, and there's a lot of challenges that go along with that. So the way that this entire movement started with the Peak Oil Task Force is there are groups of citizens here in Portland that started getting around pizza and beer just to talk about the issues and say, what can we do as citizens instead of waiting for our government to do something for us? And so it started out at a pizza shop with 4 to 5 people and then grew into a movement in Portland called Portland Peak Oil.
Okay.
And it was from Portland Peak Oil that after well over a year and a half of discussions that the idea of coming up with a resolution to approach a city with really was born into itself, just from everybody getting together and having a wide variety of citizens from a multitude of backgrounds come together and create a document, a draft document, and then we started going out and getting citizens to sign a petition and get signatures to say, hey, City of Portland, we really care about this issue, and here is here are members of our community that would like us to see you address this in some manner.
So when you got out and you were getting petitions, I mean, were you trying to just make sure that that the commissioners knew that this is a broad base of people? How many signatures did you get, or did that matter? Just
there was about 600 signatures when we brought it to you, or when Jean brought it to you, and this is across the board, all sorts of citizens that are becoming more aware of the challenges that are going on with energy.
And so what did you want, what did the resolution say? What did you want the commissioners, and I point to you because you represent one, what did you want the city to do about this?
The idea of the resolution was to bring it to the city and let them know based on facts, not debate, based on facts, that the world has a finite amount of energy, that the city of Portland and its citizens and its businesses and the entire community is dependent on that energy, and that the future of that energy supply is not only in question, but we know that is in decline at the moment and going to start to exponentially decline at a rapid rate. And so that the resolution states these facts and asks the city to establish a task force to look into what can be done about this on the government level and a local municipality. And at that point, it was a draft in which it was brought to Brendan. And where'd you take it from there?
When I first received the resolution or met with the group, we kind of brought it forward and vetted it through the other council offices. I think Portland, as Randy alluded to, is a very progressive city and been the leader in a lot of these issues. We have been the only city that's had a global warming action plan, the only city that's been able to meet Kyoto protocols in the United States.
You ought to be very proud.
We are.
Very proud.
That's why we like to tout it.
It's more than just a signature on paper for you.
Exactly, and so when we were talking about the resolution and how it might move forward, we wanted it to be more than just something that we held up and said, we have a resolution. We wanted it to be translate into results. And from a government perspective, we like to think that a lot of the good ideas here in Portland come from our citizen groups. They don't come from City Hall. And so when they brought this to us, it seemed pretty much like a no-brainer. It seemed like it was something that would go with what we were doing. And from a policy perspective, we thought we prepare for so many different things as a city in emergency preparedness. We prepare for terrorism. We prepare for natural disasters. Yet this is something that we can see coming down the path, and as Randy said, this is quantifiable things that we can point to say we are looking at disaster as far as energy is concerned if we don't prepare ourselves as a city. So from that perspective, it was very easy to sell the resolution to the rest of the city council.
Which sounds to me that there were two things they had to have bought, if you will. One is that they were really truly, that the facts were substantiated, were from credible sources, and so on.
Right.
And I don't, you can let me know whether that you had to do some proving or some additional information or whatever, how much it took to have those commissioners, your city council, buy that. Because I believe some people still think it's debatable, and certainly people don't know quite what the trajectory of decline will be, but we do know it's declining. I mean, it's finite, as you said.
Not a renewable resource.
So nobody argued with that one, I imagine, right?
Yeah.
The second thing is, did your, in terms of putting that sort of the no-brainer forward, I hadn't thought about in terms of emergency preparedness, that you would frame that to your commissioners in terms of, this is like terrorism, this is like St. Helens blowing again, this is like a great, tsunami, whatever, that could affect Portland.
Well,
Is that, go ahead.
well, just imagine in a very real scenario right now with the Middle East, where America imports 60% of its oil, and all of the challenges that are, and warfare that's going on. If Iran or any group decided to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, or I'm not sure the exact pronunciation, that would basically create that emergency right then and there, an immediate effect of oil shutdown. And if you trace any economics for any business, it goes back to oil, and it all comes around to that. And if there's an immediate shutoff of that, it's the economic implications of immediately rising prices to an unsustainable level. If that's not an emergency, what is?
That's a good point. As someone has said, there's energy which feeds economy.
Right.
And so I'm sure that, stopping the city or paralyzing it in a huge manner, or the whole country, or the world actually, is big. So then what? I mean, so this seemed to be a no-brainer. How did you then get it passed? Was that an easy no-brainer as well, or?
Well, I think as we just, I think from my perspective in shopping it around to the other elected officials, we had a good group of folks, as Randy also said, that represented a broad base of our citizens, from business owners to activists to people that were elected officials in other jurisdictions that are to our planning commission members. The support was pretty broad. And so that made it pretty easy. And then also putting it in the context that other people can understand as far as the being prepared as a city. These are your tax dollars. We need to be prepared in case. Using that kind of rhetoric is actually quite helpful because while there is a large contingency of people within the city, there are people that are going to be skeptical. And like I said, we are a progressive city, and it's pretty easy to get these kinds of things across. Other cities across the nation might want to take that sort of tact when they approach their elected officials and policymakers on how to move these things forward. To look at it in that context can usually get people to think about it in a way where they want to do something.
Using your tax dollars well and being prepared in this emergency case.
It's an energy issue and one that the city could be crippled by economically and otherwise.
Yeah, and if you think about it, we're actually taking quite a pro-business stance with this. We want business to be able to continue. We want people to be able to still have purchasing power without having to pay $6, $7 for a gallon of gasoline.
Yes.
Which is just the first way that many people start to understand and feel the pain of energy scarcity.
sure, they'll feel in their own wallet for their own private
Yeah.
vehicle usage, but they're going to feel it secondarily through higher prices for everything, or jobs or businesses that close down,
Yes.
and layoffs and so on. It can ripple
Right.
really
Right.
deeply. So you shopped it around, used that kind of language, and took it through, and it passed. Is that right?
It passed unanimously
Whoa.
through council with a lot of positive feedback from the other elected officials. And we had some great testimony from the folks in the community that were interested in supporting the resolution. So I have to say I wasn't worried going in, and sometimes I am when resolutions come forward. It was really something that was embraced and supported wholeheartedly by the entire council.
Well, it would naturally follow from your stance on Kyoto Protocol and so
Right.
on. I mean, it would be an extension, I would imagine, of that.
Indeed.
So now what? It's the resolution is passed. You can't sit there,
And-
or
and-
somebody might, but you can't. What do you do to move that forward and into action in your community? Go ahead.
Might also say that the resolution was less than 2 pages in length. This is not a complicated accomplishment. It's pretty straightforward. And from there on, once it passed, the call went out to members of the community and business to apply like a job for the task force, right?
So you created a task force.
Yeah,
Right.
and that was a process in itself because we wanted to make sure we were having a broad representation of folks on the committee. We didn't want people coming from the same perspective. One of the big things about the resolution too is that we were able to get our State Department of Energy to donate a staff person and staff time to provide the information that this task force is going to need to come forward with the recommendations that we are going to bring forward to City Council, I believe before the end of the calendar year was our charge by the resolution.
So the task force has a job to do. We'll find out what that is.
Right.
By the end of the year, it's nice to get somebody to provide that kind of information. That's a real piece of support from your Department of Energy.
As well as the Office of Sustainable Development and staffing as well.
You guys,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So Brendan, how many people on the task force and wide representation? So from the community, somebody chose who those folks are. How many folks do you have?
We have 11?
12.
12, excuse me, on the committee, and we had probably about 60 applications filled out. Folks are very interested in the subject matter, and if you go to the meetings, as we'll hear about a little bit more, there are a lot of people there that are still involved that aren't on the committee.
Excellent.
And in reviewing those, we wanted to make sure that we had people from the private sector that might have some business experience. Somebody like Randy that has some marketing experience. Somebody that's on our planning commission that understands land use. Someone that understands food. Someone that understands transportation. So we needed to have people on the committee that kind of had a broad base of knowledge that could bring
Yes.
forth recommendations to the city that will, be easy for us to implement.
Another balancing aspect of the committee and the people that are on it is not only the business and the structural aspects of the city, but there's a real emotional burden when you understand the energy challenges that we face in the future. So we also have sociologists and behavioral aspects, psychology,
Good.
because as a human being, once you understand the absolute rethinking that needs to take place with our energy construct that we have right now, there's a social aspect to it as well, from thinking all the way down to what is the future of my children,
Yes.
goes right along in the task force with how are we going to use this plot of land.
I'm really glad to hear that, because I think that our sense of the values we've held, the promises we believe we have about this future that's always growing, this economy that's always growing, having what people have lived their lives for, basically come up to a wall or say that doesn't work anymore, can be horrendously disillusioning. And I think that's part of the denial we see about this whole topic for many.
Right.
And that despair. So I'm really glad you're also going to be addressing the human component of this. That's heartening.
It is, and it boils down to there's only so much that a city government can do, and then there's a point of every single person doing some serious inner research and saying, how am I contributing to this problem, and what can I do, and what can my family do, and what can my friends do to help change this?
Do you expect the task force to come out with, I should ask what your charter is, but do you expect to come out with suggestions for individuals or neighborhoods or small groups? Or is it mostly, I'll just get to what's the task? What's
Well,
the scope of your task?
Everything.
It's pretty broad.
Once you delve into this, and as one of the task force members, you understand that there are so many integrated parts that overlap, from economics to food to transportation to land use to social aspects, where if you try to take on the micro elements of that, it will quickly overwhelm you. So what the task force has done is first and foremost, the first meeting was to figure out, well, how are we going to even approach this? Never mind try to come up with solutions. It's working backwards if you try to offer solutions up front without really going into the questions that you need to ask. And so what we started doing is saying, well, what are the questions we need to ask first and foremost, and what are the large groups that these questions can fit into? And we broke up the task force into 4 subgroups. One of them handles transportation and land use. One of them is handling the economic shifts and the economic evolution that will be taking place and is taking place, the social services aspect, and then the food and agriculture aspect. And once you break it down into those 4 areas, all of the other aspects of dealing with it can fit underneath them in an umbrella. And so once you've done that, and you start to ask the questions like, where do we even get food in Portland? Or where would any city, depending on your geography, if you're in Las Vegas or you're in Phoenix, you import your food. It comes in on transportation with trucks that need gas, which will rise in price. And you can start to follow the money and follow the oil down to the supply lines. So when you look at the entire problem, it can be overwhelming. So the first step for any city that is going to take this on would be to, I think, break it up into those groups. And by no means is this the proper way. This is our way. This is what we have felt is the best manner. And once that is established, then you start asking, well, what are the questions that we need to ask about food security? What do people eat? Where do they eat? How much do they spend on it? Where does that come from in a transportation model? How is the land used for growing food, or is this land used for building houses?
And
it overlaps.
In your region.
Right.
Yes,
Right?
in our region, and we're considering the city of Portland. However, you cannot just look at your city, because
Right.
every city is part of a global economy. And so you can only do so much for yourselves without really looking and saying, wow, we get mangoes in January. Can that go on much longer?
Yeah, we've been chatting with people. It's like, I expect after a while it will be too expensive to have pineapples flown in from Hawaii,
Yeah.
right? But there are a lot of very persevering people who are holding the faith that coffee and chocolate will still make its way into the North America, even though, of course, they're not locally grown at all.
There will be somebody who always pays for coffee and
There
chocolate,
you
no matter
go.
what the price
That's
is.
what we figured out. All the way to Portland.
Yeah.
So when you think about what I hear is everything is interdependent. Everything is connected to everything else. Not only the globalized economy, which is a relatively recent thing at the scale that it's at right now.
This is forcing us to realize our interdependency, not only on the systems, but with the Earth's limitations. Mm-hmm. Everything is interdependent, and we're realizing it's not survival of the fittest, it's community that will help you persevere. And understanding the limitations of what is consumed is not just the life of that product. If you buy a product, do you think about what went into making that? the life of the product, and then what happens to that afterwards, or products and services, really.
So in that kind of consciousness, we think, I mean, I think exists more in Portland than a lot of other places. But for us, I mean, for the task force too, it's seeing where our vulnerabilities are as a city.
Absolutely.
And finding out, I mean, I think that's one of the core things too. I mean, we know that it takes the average plate of food that you have on your table travels 1,000 miles to get there. And that's one of the big things where we've been moving forward on projects to utilize land to create more local production of food, which is another one of those kind of pro-business things that we kind of look at, because agriculture is a huge part of the state of Oregon and the history of our region. So that's another thing that we hope to encourage, to find out how we can do more of these things by examining, you know, what kind of things can be grown here, what are the eating patterns, and those sorts of things.
Well, and the challenge of that is that there is no one way to look at it, because you consider food being grown, well, then that gets into land use and transportation.
Land use is going to fit this.
And if you have a farmer right now that's growing Christmas trees, the impacts of higher prices of oil means that they may have a diminishing market in the future, so they may switch over to growing food and sell that locally. So what we're talking about is complete system interchange, changing around, looking at how can businesses thrive in a changing world on a local basis, and everything coming together is the biggest challenge that the task force is facing. Is you can't just ask one question and have that answer pertain to that one question. Then you have to find how that overlaps in all these areas.
So we have just about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to say, your task force has already put out some kind of document.
Yes.
What is that? And yeah, what is that?
Brendan?
With the briefing?
The briefing book.
Well, I'll let you go on.
Okay. The briefing book was given to each of the task force members. It's about a 90-page document that includes the facts and figures that we would need to reference in order to try to answer the questions. And the ultimate task right now for what we would consider, this is a phase 1 task force, to bring a limited set of recommendations to City Council out of all of the most important things we could do, a filtered, this is the top of the top recommendations that we think are the utmost importance for this city to take on. And this 90-page document is a reference guide from population to the economics to everything that we might need to reference. However, it's still not enough. We find ourselves asking questions that you're tasked with having to go and do the research for us.
And it's, you know, in these kind of efforts and giving advice to other communities and other organizations that are interested in pursuing avenues like this, it's very keeping focused and saying that you have a director is one of the most important things to do. We have a Sustainable Development Commission, and we have a Food Policy Council here too, and we've seen some of these efforts implode in themselves because the issues are just so vast and so interconnected to so many other things, and so many questions come up related to the question that you're trying to answer. So I think the task force has been really good at taking on trying to take on just, okay, we have a limited, like as Randy said, this is probably a phase 1. We're asking them to come back and, you know, with this charge of doing 6 months and coming back with recommendations.
Recommendations in 6 months, sort of the high-level recommendations.
And that's one of the things that you have to watch out for if other cities take this on, is not to become recommendation-oriented from the beginning. You can easily find yourself having discussions and then say, well, what if we could just do this? And you're still finding a recommendation without researching it. And the biggest advice would be to not get in that mode of thinking yet. And to make sure that you have explored all of the avenues of that subject before you think you know what the recommendation should be. So it is applied critical thinking at a level. It's the biggest challenge of my life, and it's wonderful because there's so much hope, and that's what we are really hoping to offer, is that this is not the end of the American dream. We see it as the beginning of a new dream. You know, it's putting to bed a way of living and doing business and running the world that is not sustainable. The earth cannot handle it anymore. So we're coming up with a new dream. We may have to do with less, but it's an opportunity to make something positive out of what is inevitably going to happen anyway.
So if we choose to do with less materially,
Yes.
what we have is the opportunity to build the interior, right? Our relationships to each other and to the natural world and to our city. And
You will get to know your
community.
neighbors intimately.
I expect that will be true. And we will find out how do we learn to get along.
It's such a revolutionary act for somebody to knock on the door of a neighbor 5 houses down from them.
Yes.
Most Americans, I would be willing to put money on the table and wager a bet that they do not know the names of their neighbors 5 houses down from them right now in the typical suburban model. And it's going to become a community-oriented effort, like it or not. So
Might as well join in and
May
have
as
a good
well
time
join
and,
in.
and get to know your community. And I look forward, I just want to say here in the last minute, I look forward to seeing what those recommendations, those high-level recommendations look like and how broad or narrow that reach, because I think that you do, including the land outside of Portland city limits, you know, how much of that is growing land that can be used to support your city, and how much you'll use the waterways along the Columbia for your transportation,
Right.
which you're in a wonderful position for. I think you have, it's great, you have a big challenge.
Well, it's the beginning, and it's going to be an ongoing issue that we're going to be addressing from here on out. So,
For
Absolutely.
the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
for the rest of our lives.
Right. So, any last words in our last half minute here?
My words are to not wait for someone else to do it. If somebody is watching this, they have it in their heart to do something about it. And they'll probably find that they're one of the first that want to take action, and there are other people that want to do it with them. Get organized, hit the internet, go to city meetings, let them know you're concerned, find other citizens. You are not weird, you're not alone. Do something, because it's going to come from inside people that understand the problems we face.
Right.
And it can be done.
and don't underestimate the understanding that might be at the elected officials level.
Yes.
Yay.
Elected officials can do it. They understand. You know?
Show them how. Thank you, both
Thank
of
you.
you. And
Sure.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Join us next time.